Hi everybody, this is Carrie. This is your discussion for Here Comes Everybody for week 3 of the course. We're having you read 4 chapters this week, and I know that that's a lot, but there's a reason for that. I wanted to make sure that you got through chapter 7 before you watched the video of Clay Shirky talking at the Berkman Center, because a lot of the bits and pieces that he talks about in his lecture are covered in these first 7 chapters of the book. Now there is some stuff that's covered later, which you'll remember when you get to it, when you read it. But for now, we just wanted to make sure that we got you at least this far so that you would get some reinforcement when you saw some of these things again when you watched the video. So just to highlight a couple of points from the different chapters, and I'm looking at my notes over here on the side. In chapter 4, Publish Then Filter, Shirky talks a lot about user-created content and what that means and all the different ways that the internet and social networking tools allow that to happen. And he makes an interesting point around page 85 where he talks about these things like Facebook and Twitter and the question that, kind of why in the world would anybody put this stuff out there for people to read? Maybe this kind of private sort of stuff, it's just out there and anybody can read it, and why would anybody do that? We got into a little bit of a discussion kind of touching on that at the Bluffton group's first class time. So I'm encouraging you to look for this section of the chapter and read it pretty carefully and just see what you think of Shirky's points there. Also, Shirky talks a little bit in this chapter about what it means to be famous, particularly in the context of all of this technology that's going on. He also talks about revolution in the same kind of way, how technology and change can bring on revolution. He brings up an idea called community of practice, and that's a term that we've used before in various contexts, but he talks a little bit about what it means in the context of technology that we're talking about in this book. And then he makes an interesting comment at the end of the chapter where he says consumer is sort of defined as a temporary behavior rather than a permanent identity. I thought that was an interesting point, and I'm wondering if there are some connections over to what we're reading in Wikinomics. So maybe if somebody wants to take that up and get that out on the right board and unpack it and talk about that a little bit. So those were kind of the key points that I pulled out of Chapter 4, but certainly you should be looking for other things too, and to pull all of that out, get it up on the right board and talk about it a little more. In Chapter 5, he's talking a little bit more about collaboration and collaborative projects, and this is where Shirky uses Wikipedia as a big example for collaboration. And so if you're still a little skeptical about Wikipedia and why it's so successful and why it is what it is, read Chapter 5 pretty closely. And I'm interested to see what you guys do with the right boards for Chapter 5, especially in the context of what we've already read about Wikipedia and maybe what we've discussed a little bit in our different classes on session 1, the first night of class. Just want to also point out in this chapter that Shirky uses that ladder metaphor where he talks about sharing, cooperation, and collective action. In the video, he will actually insert collaboration in as rung 3 of that ladder, and I think that's actually more accurate because I feel like in the examples he gives, especially about collaboration, it almost deserves to have its own place. So kind of think about that as well, what it might mean to have a 4-step ladder there. And again, he'll talk more about that in the video. Chapter 6 is a little bit different kind of chapter where Shirky's talking about collective action, and he uses the Catholic sex abuse scandal from a couple of years ago to talk about collective action there as an example of some things that happened. So kind of be on the lookout for that and see what you can pull from that chapter for the right board. And then Chapter 7, titled Faster and Faster, Shirky uses 2 examples from this chapter in his talk at the Berkman Center. The idea of flash mobs and particularly the ones that occurred in October Square. And I'll leave it at that and let you explore that to find out what flash mobs are. And also the story that he tells about airplanes sitting on the tarmac for hours and hours and hours, and what eventually happened with the Passengers' Bill of Rights there. Also in Chapter 7, he talks a little bit about Twitter and some ways that it's being used by certain groups around the world. So be on the lookout for that discussion, and especially if you're having any further question about why something like Twitter would be so useful. He gives some really really concrete examples in this chapter for that. So that's the next 4 chapters of Here Comes Everybody. And again, we want you to get through these so that when you watch the video, you're going to get some reinforcement from some of these points as well. Just to say a little bit about the right board, I think many of you are doing some really great stuff there. I am taking the right board a little bit differently than what George is, in that I really just want you to pull out the key points from each of the chapters, talk about ways that they might connect back and forth across chapters, and also bring up any kind of connection that you see in anything that we're talking about in class in general, or anything that you're reading in Wikinomics too. If you can see some connections from stuff in Here Comes Everybody to other things that we're talking about, make those connections and talk about them on the right board. I feel like the chapters in Here Comes Everybody can kind of stand alone, and so that's why I think it's important for us to pull out the key points and summarize things a little bit. And if I see that you're kind of struggling, or maybe you're not quite getting at all of the points in the chapter that are worth, getting into a Cliff's Notes version, sort of, I might post some questions or make a couple of comments on the right board that then you can erase and respond to, and do that. And again, the format here is to kind of create a single document with the high points of each chapter. So it's fine to go in and put your list of comments and even, sign your name if you want to, but then be prepared for the next person to come along and enhance your notes and then sign their name too. I'm less concerned about you signing your name to what you've posted there, and more just helping to develop each other, create a single list of all the key points, and then going into that list and developing those points a little bit further. So I think you're doing some great work. Just keep up the good work. And again, we're working toward kind of one single document that reviews each of the chapters of the book, and again, makes connections to Wikinomics where that's appropriate, or makes connections to other things that we talk about in class where that might be appropriate too. So enjoy these 4 chapters and watch the video. I think that Shirky's kind of an interesting speaker, and so I'll be looking forward, at least with the Bluffton group, to talking about what your thoughts were on the video. I may try to sneak into some of the other the discussions with the Archbold and Pickle groups as well, as time permits, to see what you thought of the video as well. So thanks very much for watching, and we will see you again soon. Bye-bye.